And welcome to Isle of Wight Bushcraft. You join me for the third video in this series on knife skills. In this video we're going to be looking at or focusing on various different types of grip with our knife and different methods of cutting. So stay tuned. Well, in the last video we looked at knife sharpening and knife maintenance, but in this video we're going to be looking at or focusing on various different types of grip with our knife and different methods of cutting. So to begin with, let's look at the various types of grip that we may employ when using our bushcraft knife. So the first and probably the most often used knife grip is the forehand grip. Now we'd employ that grip in the majority of cuts. Second is the backhand grip. Now it's not often we're going to use this grip, but there might be instances where this could prove both safer and more useful. Well, we might also use what's known as a chest lever grip, where it's almost like a backhand grip, and we come across our chest, and imagine we've got our piece of wood in our hand, and we use our chest frame, really, our rib cage, to use as leverage, and we can sharpen in that fashion. That's a chest lever grip. And we may also use what's called the reinforced grip. Now here we can see that we might be shaping a piece of wood and we're using the fingers to aid us in shaping the wood or cutting. And we may also use it in this fashion where we're using the thumb, obviously keeping our fingers well clear. We're using our thumb to assist in the cutting or the shaping of the wood. There's also another grip that I use. I call it a lanyard grip. Now this lanyard is the correct length, so that I can slip it over my hand and then grip the knife right at the tip, and that gives me more leverage if I'm wanting to cut down a twig or a small branch or a sapling, so that I can utilise that. It gives me more leverage, more power in the cut. So I call that the lanyard grip. And the reason for the lanyard obviously is for safety, because if I'm holding the knife at the tip, the pommel end, as you can see me here, I don't want that. I don't want to lose grip and that fly out my hand into my leg. If I let go, the lanyard's there to stop the knife flying off in any direction and causing damage to myself or anybody else. Okay, so those are the various knife grips that we use when making our cuts. Well, let's now look at the various knife cuts and cutting methods that we might use when we're using our knife. Well, let's look at snapping or breaking wood first. So we have a piece of wood that we want to break, clean cut. So what we do is we'll make a series. We're using the forehand grip. We're making a series, and we're reinforcing it a little bit as well. We're making a series, we rotate the wood, a series of V-cuts around the circumference of the thin branch or twig. So there we are. And then what we do, we turn the piece of wood around and then perform the same operation the other way. Just those series of V-cuts. And you can see there, I'm just reinforcing that knife with my thumb. And I'm in complete control. And you can see there that there's a shallow notch, shallow V notch all around the circumference of the wood. And then it's just a simple case of pit, and we've got a nice clean break. So that's a breaking cut. Now another useful cutting method, very useful actually, is shaving, and that comes in particularly useful if we're making feather sticks. And feather sticks can be very useful if we're in a wet woodland and all the wood is really wet. Then we can take a piece of dead standing and just trim off the outer wood and use the core to make feather sticks, and that way we've got dry tinder to begin our fire. So again, with shaving we're using the forehand grip and straight arm. So we're using the straight arm, making sure that the edge of the timber is secure, and we're using the straight arm to make feather sticks. You can see there I've got the piece of wood secure, and then straight arm, and we just use the knife in a downward motion and gently does it. We're just making these feathers. As you get to the end of the stroke, just angle the knife out. That makes room for the next feather. This is not a feather stick tutorial, but I'll deal with that another time. But you can see that shaving is a very useful cutting method. When I shave, I always just angle the knife slightly as well and work the blade and work across the blade as well at that angle. Don't need to put too much pressure on. Now another useful cutting method is the what I call the cross cut. Others may call it different things, but basically it's a way, or it's a cut and a means of making a hook. So for example, say this long stick that I've got here, I want to put a hook on the end so I can suspend my billy can or kettle over the fire. Then I can use this cut to make a hook in the end to hang my kettle. So let's have a look how we do that. So around an inch or so from the end, 2 inches to be safe. Just make a diagonal cut across the grain and just work that in. You want to be reasonably deep, and you want to be going at a slight angle as well, not straight in, but a slight angle, diagonal cut. And then the same again in this direction. So we've got a cross cut there, and again at that same angle going into the wood. And there we are. I've just peeled some of the bark off there so you can see that cross cut. There we are. So now once we've got this cross cut, we then take the knife, and at the parallel with this first cross cut, we're going to come probably about 6mm out from that, and then angle that in, and then push the knife in and remove that material down to that cut there, like so. There we are. You can see I've removed that material. Just clean it up a little bit. There we are. And then we repeat the process for the other side. So I've just turned that stick around, and then again repeating that process. What I do is just rocking action, just work that knife in and then back into that cut that we made initially, and just remove that material. There we are. Let's clean that up a little bit. And once that cut's made, we can just clean that up a little bit, and just take a little bit more material out of there just to deepen that a little. Not too far, but we just want to take a little bit more out just to deepen that notch. There we go. That's perfect now. That's perfect. There we are. Now, to finish off our hook, we can use another cutting method known as truncating. And basically, simple, we just use our knife on the wood, and we use a stick or a small mowel, and we just use that almost similar to batoning, just to cut through and trim the end of our stick off. So if we're looking to cut through not too thick piece of wood, but you know, small to medium size, we can just truncate by using the mowel to break that wood. So we finish that hook off by using that cutting method. We have our hook then. You can see there we have our hook, so we're just going to trim it off about a ½ an inch from the edge of the cut there, to around about there. Then we can just take our stick or our mowel. Not really a mowel, it's not really big enough, but you're using it in the same manner. Then we can just this is why a good blade is essential for this. And there we are. So you can see we've got that nice hook now. So we use that truncating cut to trim the end off, and you can see we've got that nice hook now that we can use to suspend our billy can, kettle, or whatever we want to suspend above the fire. And there we are. There's our hook. We can just hang, for example, if I'm using this billy can, you can just hang that on the hook. Now, another cutting method that we can use our knife for is, it's more drilling actually, but it's still using a knife for cutting in a way. Is, as I say, is drilling. Using the point of our knife to actually make a hole through a piece of timber. We might want to do that for a vast array of reasons, particularly in constructing maybe bushcraft furniture, a chair and so forth, or to attach a line to something. But yeah, drilling, that can, knowing how to drill with a knife can prove useful. So let's demonstrate that. Yeah. The first thing we want to do is we want to take a pencil. If you don't have a pencil in camp, which is probably going to be the case, use a piece of charcoal from the fire and just mark where you want your hole. So for example, I'm going to mark it there, and then just using your finger as a guide, put your finger against the piece of wood and line that up with a point, and then you can just strike a line that way. So there we are. We just take our finger, use our finger as a guide, mark one side, turn the wood over, and the same again. You see, I'm using my finger as a guide there. So you know that that's where your hole is going to line up. Obviously you want to where you're coming through the wood from both sides with a knife, you want the holes to line up. Now say for example I want the hole there, put a little cross there, and again I can do the same again, use my finger as a guide and then line the point of the pencil up with my cross, reverse the wood, same again, finger as a guide, and I can mark the hole. There we are. So that hole should be the same on both sides, it should line up. So now we can take the knife and then just take the point of the knife on that mark, and then we can just start working that hole in. You can either turn the wood to rotate that, but I prefer to leave the wood, use two hands and just use the knife. Okay, now what we can start to do is just, once we've got that hole marked, reverse the wood and then do the same again. I kind of use 3 to and fro strokes, and then turn the knife a little bit, another 2 or 3 strokes, turn the knife a bit, another 2 or 3 strokes, turn the knife a bit, and then work the knife around. That way the hole is kept even. There we are. And we turn the wood back, and then we go a little bit deeper this time. Okay, now once we start to feel resistance against the edge of the blade, that's the time to stop drilling. Now we need to hollow out a chamfer, almost like being a countersunk area around each hole. And again, we'll need to turn the wood for this, but we're just looking to hollow out that hole. And again, just be mindful of where the knife, the direction of travel of the knife. We don't want that slipping toward a finger or a thumb. You can see there that that's being hollowed out now. Same the other side. There we are, we're countersinking that hole. I mean, this is a strong blade. It shouldn't damage it, but if you were trying to work that hole all the way through against those fibres, it's inefficient, but on a lesser knife could actually break the edge of the blade. We don't want that, so we just hollow that out now. And then once we've got it hollowed out to the depth of our initial drill, we can then drill a little bit further. And then reverse and do the same the other side. And again, once we start to feel the fibres resisting the edge of the blade, which we're starting to now, that's the time to hollow out that area around that drill point. Again, being mindful of the direction of travel of the knife. If we slip, it's not going to do any damage. If I have my thumb there and I'm trying to do that and I slip, that's what's going to happen. So always be mindful of the direction of travel of the knife if you slip. Okay. Sometimes it's useful just to turn that wood. Okay, you can see it's getting a little deeper now, so now we can drill a little bit further. Turn the wood, or reverse the wood and do the same from the other side. There we are, that just needs a little bit of hollowing out there. There we are. You can see we're almost through. So it's a very useful little cutting process for making holes. As you can see there, we're just about through now, so we'll just clean that up a little bit. I know I keep saying it, but just be mindful of the direction of travel of that knife. And the reason I keep on saying it is because it's so vitally important, and I'm telling myself as well as I'm doing this to be mindful of that. There we are, so there's our hole. We can just tidy that up now, and there we are. So we have a nice neat hole. So like I say, that can prove to be a very useful method in certain instances. Well, there we are. Now another very useful method in which we can use our knife is we can actually use it as a draw knife. So I'll demonstrate how we can do that, and that may prove very useful at times, being able to just smooth or smarten up a piece of wood that we may need to use for a project or a camp. So yeah, very useful knowing we can use this as a draw knife. So to make our knife into a draw knife, first of all what we need is a handle for the other side. I've got a piece of fruit wood here, and then we would just fix that knife into that wood, and that would then be our handle, and then we can use that as a draw knife. So there we are. I've got my piece of wood which is going to be my handle, and then I'm going to take the knife, stand the knife upright, and then place the handle on the point of the knife where I want it to be. Now obviously keep your hand away from this area or don't try and use your hand and do that, because if that splits and comes through you'll have a pretty nasty hole in your hand or a gash. So there we go. We just use our small little mouse stick and then just tap that in. Just use little taps, don't overdo it, just every now and again, just feel it, see how sturdy it is. There we are. A little bit more maybe. Just short little taps because we don't want to damage this part of the knife. And that's yeah, that's pretty sturdy now, so that'll do. Okay, so you can see I've got this piece of timber that I'm just going to demonstrate. I'm only using this for demonstration purposes. But you'll see there how I've got that supported between my stomach, nice bit of body weight behind it, and this piece of cliff wall here. And then it's just a case of taking the knife handle and this handle we've put on, and you can see that's makes a very useful draw knife. Well, there we are. I think you'll agree that could prove very useful in certain situations. Now another cutting method we can use, very simple one this, is if we need to point a stick. With using a straight arm and the forehand grip and following through with 3 clean cuts, simple as that, to just point the stick. We might need to point a stick for tent stakes and so forth, whatever it may be. Very simple, but often needed. So we just take our stick, keep our arm nice and straight, and just from the end follow through. There's one cut, and then our third cut. There we are. Another useful cutting method is using the reinforced grip. So for shaping, we're just using that thumb there, give us leverage. And again, always be mindful of the direction of travel of the knife. If you had a finger here, for example, then and you slip or you misdirect your cut, you could slice your finger clean off. Seriously, with this knife it's so sharp. But there we go. Everything's out of harm's way. If that knife slips, not a problem. So there we are. So that's using the reinforced grip, shaping cut, and we can also use the fingers to help us as well. I'll demonstrate that now. So again, if I'm shaping a piece of wood, take this piece of wood for example, I can put it in my chest and grip that with this hand, and then just use my fingers to reinforce that. So that's where I'm using the backhand grip, actually, using the backhand grip, and just using the fingers there to reinforce that cutting action. Just using those fingers to help me shape that piece of wood. There we are. I'm not putting too much pressure on it, you can't really with your finger, so if it did slip I'm only going to go so far. So there we are. Now I mentioned earlier that I have a lanyard on my knife, and that's leather of course, so it's pretty tough. You could use paracord as well, but that's I've tied that, and so it's the correct length, so that when I put it round the back of my wrist, it's the perfect length to be able to then grip my knife by the pommel end. And I can use that then for a slashing cut if I want to, you know, an awkward area, an awkward or hard to get at stick that I want to cut. So I'll just demonstrate that now. So say for example I wanted to take this piece off here, I could just put my hand up through, grip the pommel, and then slash cut from underneath and then from the top. I'm not going to hold that because in case I slip, but you can see it does quite a good job. There we are. Now there is another cutting method that can sometimes be used, which could prove very useful in the field, particularly if you have an injury to one of your hands or one of your arms, and that's what I called using a stand-in blade. So I'll demonstrate that now. So what we do is we take our knife, and making sure that we've got a firm grip on it with our thumb on top of the pommel, so that that our hand cannot slip, and our fingers down the blade. Make sure we've got a firm grip on that. Thumb over the pebble, and then ram the knife into to a stable piece of wood, a good stable platform. Then we can just take our piece of wood, and if we need to shape it, we can just use the stand-in blade to shape that end of the piece of wood, like so. And with practice you can get quite good at this. Now when we're using this method, it's best to use the belly of the blade. That way we're exerting less pressure on the knife, and of course less liable to dislodge it. Obviously if we were using the blade just toward the handle, then that's more pressure on the knife, and it more than likely dislodge it from its stable wood platform that I'm using here. So best to use the belly of the knife, and then the knife will more likely stay in position. Now another cut that we can also use is known as a spear notch. If we need to notch the end of a stick to maybe we need to fashion an arrow or a spear, or maybe we need to notch the end of a stick for another reason, then the spear notch is a useful cut to know. So again, I'll demonstrate that now. So I've got this stick here that we might use for a spear notch. It's not straight, but I'm not actually going to be using this, it's just for demonstration. We have our stick here. So for example, I'm going to break it here, is we just create I'm using the thumb there just to help me work that in. We're just going to just turn that wood around. We're just creating a V notch. Don't go too deep. There we are. Now, keeping our blade, the edge of our blade in the deepest part of that notch, can then rotate the wood, and that will leave a score line. There we are. And then that way we know where the middle of that V-notch is, because what we want to do now is we want to turn that wood 180 degrees so that we can now put a V-notch in the opposing position to the one that we just cut. Just turn that wood around. The reason I'm turning the wood around is so that I'm always notching away from me and not turning the knife and coming that way, which if I slipped, of course, could cut myself. There we are. So there's the other notch. So we've got our 2 V-notches. So what we do now is say an inch or maybe an inch and a half up from these notches. We'd do the same again, but rather than being lined, they would be at 90 degrees, if you can imagine, from these two. So we'll cut our first notch there, and this stick isn't totally straight, which does make it a little bit awkward. And then we'll turn the wood around, and the same again. There we are. Again, same again, keep the blade in the notch, just rotate the stick, that way you'll get a nice score line. And then you can make sure you know that your notches are going to be lined up. And if you look at these 2 previous V-notches I've put in there, that helps you to ascertain whereabouts this final notch needs to be. Having the line there, that score line, also helps you to see how far in you need to go with a knife. There we are. So there's our 2 V's, and we'll just take a little bit more out of that one there. That's it. And then a little bit more there. So we've got 2 V-notches there, and then 2 opposing there. So that's the first thing that we need to do in order to cut our spear notch. And then just to help the cut when you're going to break the stick, which I'll demonstrate in a minute, just put a couple of score lines between each of the V-cuts at their deepest points, and that will aid when you break the cut. Same the other side. You might want to run the knife in those a few times, being careful to be accurate, of course, and that will help when breaking the cut. And then it's a case of placing your thumb and supporting the whole of the area of wood between those 2 notches, and then just gradually ease it. You'll hear the break. Once it breaks, do the same the other side just to help it, loosen it. And then just gradually there we are. All we need to do now is we can just clean that up with a knife, scrape out any excess material there. Just take the bark off, and there we've got our notched stick. It could also be used, this cut, if you were making a drill, you know, for a bow and drill. Say you wanted to put a small napped piece of flint, you could then fix that in there, obviously with a straighter stick, but then you'd have a nice drill for a primitive. I don't like that term primitive. I don't know why we refer to it, because it's not actually primitive. It's quite an ingenious tool, and I'm a great believer in low tech. I think low tech is might not be as quick, but I think it's better for me. I think low tech stuff less to go wrong, and might not be as quick, but often the materials are in harmony with the environment, and there's a satisfaction in it as well. Now, take for example the horse and cart. It might not be as quick a mode of transport as a Bugatti Veyron. It may not be as quick as one of those, but the exhaust fumes from a horse and cart certainly don't pollute the atmosphere. In actual fact, they help the ground. No MOTs needed, less to go wrong. If you break a wheel, we just make another one out of wood. Easy. Don't need smelting processes, or you don't need big plants to produce the materials needed. Anyway, I digress. There we are, there's our spear notch. Well, there we are, knife grips and cutting methods. Hope you found that helpful. Now, if this is your first time at Isle of Wight Bushcraft, why not click on the subscribe button down below there, and you'll get access to lots of other content. And if you click on the notification bell as well beside it, then you'll be notified of all new upcoming videos. And also, why not leave a like and a share, and comment as well. That really does help the channel. And also, if you're into, if you like a bit of foraging, then check out this video. And we found some lovely fungi, lovely mushrooms on this trip out. Well worth a watch. I'll put a link to this video in the description box below. All you need to do is click on that little downward facing arrow, the menu will drop, and I'll put the link in there for you. It'll be highlighted in blue. Well, that's all for this time, folks. Thanks for joining me. In the next video in this series, we'll be looking at knife safety. Until then, take care. Bye for now. Cut. Oh dear. I'm not putting that in. Okay.